Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1 of Grits in the Gospel. My name is Reverend Katie Griffis. I probably will drop the Reverend eventually, but again, I'm just trying to remind myself that this is really happening and this call is very real. And I'm doing this thing. So welcome to episode 1. If you listen to episode 0, it's just kind of a setup of what this podcast will be about. And in that podcast, I said it's mainly just going to be sermons. I doubt I'll do any episodes. And then after I recorded that and went back and listened to it, I thought, maybe I do need to do a couple of episodes before we start loading sermons. So I'm recording episode 1 and episode 2 just as kind of a background record of how I got to where I am today on this rainy Thursday. I'm just going to go through today what my call to ministry was like. And I'm calling this episode Living the Call because it is something that you live out every day. I try to set office hours, but the truth is in ministry, there are really no office hours. It is a full-time job, 24/7. And so I am going to do one episode on this one called Living the Call. And then the next episode, I'm going to go over something that's very important to me, that's always been important to me, but I didn't realize quite how much it would be an important part of my life. I'm going to talk about building community. And there may be a couple other things that I do before we start loading those sermons or in the middle of them, because there are some things that nobody told me as a woman in ministry before I started, and I think it would be helpful to get some of that information out in the world. And hopefully the things that I have learned can help other ministers, but especially other women in ministry. And I'm really excited to share those things. So today, I was going to tell you the story, the long version of my call to ministry. I had my first real meeting with my North Georgia district superintendent the other day, and I've been in the room with him but had not met him. His name's Dr. Doug Galbraith, and he is fabulous. I'm such a fan. But the first thing he said when I got to his office was, "Who are you and how did you get to my district?" And so I told a short version of this, and then I thought, maybe not everybody has heard this and knows how I ended up where I am. And lots of people who have known me for a long time just kind of look at me funny and go, "Wow, I would have never guessed that this is what you would have been doing." But here we are. So I thought that was a great question. Who are you? And why are you in my district? We got a good chuckle out of it. And so here's the answer. I think it started a very long time ago. But I never saw the signs of a calling. Looking back, I should have. And the whole idea of looking back to see those milestones and those gifts and graces being honed over the years has been a real gift for me. I have been able to look back on my whole life and on the things that my experiences as a child all the way through adulthood and see the path that God has had me on the whole time. But it was the perfect timing of these recent years that I have really begun to see that. I've always done several things in life. First, I've always taken care of people. My grandparents, every summer, we would go to their lake house, but on the way to the lake, every time we went, we stopped at least one nursing home to visit a family member. And they would always tell us that, we can definitely go have fun at the lake, but we have to take care of our people first. And so we did that. We would go visit. We made sure that I watched them make sure that everyone was safe and happy and secure. And I loved visiting with my relatives and the people that we were caring for. And I watched the joy that it brought my grandparents and the responsibility that they took very seriously of taking care of people. And that's a big part of ministry. And so that's been instilled in me for a very long time. I have also always had a love of words. I love to write. I love to read. A long time ago, I had a blog. I don't even remember the name of it. But a friend of mine, Tina, encouraged me to write because she said I was a good writer and told a good story. And so I did, very briefly. And I was missing those opportunities to write. But I never really knew how to make that into, make that love of words and inspiration that I found into anything more than just a hobby or something I like to do. I also was in corporate America before I came to the ministry, and I think as miserable as corporate America is and was for me, those skill sets that I learned were invaluable. A part, even if it's a small part, of running a church is just like any other business. You have to know what a spreadsheet looks like and how to handle situations professionally and work as a team and all the things that I learned and did at my former job. I even got to flex my writing muscles there and write articles for the newsletter. I was usually a ghostwriter, but I still wrote them. And so looking back, all those little things, all those skills that I need as in ministry and taking care of people and writing sermons, all throughout my whole life were developed along with my faith. And my faith obviously happened at church. It happened at church camp. I went to a private Christian school. I was privileged enough to be able to go to a Christian school where my education included religion, and my college years did as well. And so all those things combined brought me where I am today. Now, where is that? Well, it all started a couple years ago now. I was working in corporate America where I just was not valued. I was not cared for, and I made some wonderful friends who are still my friends today, but we became friends because of, we like to call it trauma bonding over our work. And I kept thinking, gosh, there's got to be something better to do than this. There's got to be a way to help people instead of helping a corporation, help people be successful rather than helping a corporation be successful. I didn't know what that was or what that looked like, but I just knew that there had to be something better. And then two things happened that were pivotal for a lot of people. I'll never forget it. I was sitting at my desk. We in the corporate world had what most corporations used to have, which was a phone farm, rows and rows and rows and rows of people, and desks that were only 3 or 4 feet wide. And when the first person came back from a cruise with COVID, we were starting to get a little worried about it. And they knew that I was one of the primary caregivers for my grandmother, who was like 90 or 91 at the time. And so they sent me home immediately. Anyone that was a caregiver for someone who was medically either really old or medically, fragile, they sent home immediately. And I never went back to the office. And then, not from COVID, but my grandmother, Gogi, who I preach a lot about, was very influential in my life. Had some kind of, we think it was a stroke, and and passed away. Not immediately, but that started kind of her downward spiral. And we like to joke and say that woman was very, very independent. She was the matriarch of our family. And without her ability to drive herself around and to live without help, she was just not gonna, she was done. If she had to rely on us to do things for her, she was just rather be gone. So I think really and truly she made that decision for herself that she was not going to live a life that way. And I admire that very much, that that's for herself what she resolved. And so we lost Gogi, and I was in the middle of COVID, working from home. My landlords were not home much. They were at a more isolated spot. So I had, for the first time in my whole life, a whole lot of extra time. I go. That's the way I exist. I would rather be busy than bored. But this forced me to sit still and really listen and figure out what was next. And one of the things that I thought about was, one of the few things left to do is be lay leader at my home church, which is Mulberry Street United Methodist Church. And the Methodists were still providing classes toward the end of COVID. They had opened them back up to become a certified lay minister. And I thought, well, if nothing else, I'll just be a better lay leader for Mulberry and be better able to guide my home church and be a better servant leader. And so I did. I took those classes. I had a wonderful time. The last class, the last level is certified lay minister, and I took that class with one of my dear friends, Ann Bosarge. She is still working with the United Methodists in South Georgia, and I just cannot say enough good things about her and what she's doing, and I'm so thankful for her. I'd already preached a couple times at Mulberry, and I had agreed to preach at another church, which I'll get to in just a minute. But I will never forget at the end of that class, when they said that I was a lay minister, Anne looked at me and she said, "I don't know why, but I just don't see you at Mulberry forever." And I thought, well, that's terrible. Like, I love my church. Why would I go anywhere? I don't even think she remembers saying it. I've asked her about it since, and I don't think she remembers saying it. And so I came back and was kind of miffed about it, but I dismissed it. I thought, but no, all I want to do is just be a great lay leader. And maybe if a pulpit needs to be filled around, I can have a week or two here or there when I preach, but I'm certainly not, quitting my job to do this. In the middle of all that, like I said, I was filling in the pulpit for a very, very good friend of mine, also out of Mulberry Street, named Pam Johnston. She had just finished up at Candler and needed a sabbatical, which now I appreciate more than ever. And she called me, she said, "Hey, you stole my fill-in minister to go to Mulberry for a year. Can you come do it for 6 weeks? Would you preach in my pulpit?" And without hesitation, and I don't know, maybe it was just because I was too dumb to know to be scared to death about it, I said yes. And those 6 weeks were fantastic. The people at the little church are wonderful humans. They were welcoming and kind. I had family that could come and listen because it was not far from Macon, so I could still stay at home. And I really got to work on writing sermons and timing sermons and all the things that go with it. And part of those dates were over July 4th of that year. And that year, July 4th happened to be on a Sunday. And so, no, July 3rd happened to be on a Sunday. That's right, July 3rd. And I preached about my grandfather that day, who was shot down in World War II on July 3rd. And there was a couple in the sanctuary that day that I didn't recognize. But that's not my church, so I thought, well, they're just back from vacation and they're members. Well, I went up to them before the service and introduced myself, and turns out they just happened to be traveling through Georgia. It was a retired minister and his wife. And they were looking, he had just retired, and they were on kind of a trip to go find family graves and find their family members in old cemeteries, like really old cemeteries. And one of them happened to be in Forsyth. And he later told me that, I said, well, gosh, if you want to come up and do anything, or if I do anything wrong, let me know, please. Because I was brand new to this. I wasn't very confident in my preaching skills. And I said, you're welcome. He said, no. I've actually, before we came, I listened to your sermon last week and I really liked it. I said, oh, well, thank you. That's good to know. And so we went through the whole service. I preached about Morris, which I always love doing. He was a great example of faith to me. And I am so thankful that I get to use him as an example as well for my congregation now. And so the guy said, do you mind if I change clothes? My wife and I, if we change clothes after the service, because we're going to tromp through the woods and look for these graves. I said, absolutely not. Showed him where to go. And everybody had kind of left, and he was still kind of hanging around and, looking like something was still going on. And he pulled me aside and he said, I've never done this before. I've never been told. Nothing's ever happened to me like this before. He said, but I know I'm supposed to tell you that I don't know what job you have right now, but you need to quit. You need to quit your job and you need to go into ministry because you have a gift. And I think I had to legitimately pick my job off the ground because nobody ever, well, that's not true. People had said it, but people at Mulberry are people that I've known my whole life, my high school teachers, friends, family. I mean, they're supposed to say that, right? Like they're just being nice because they love me and they're supposed to say nice things. But this guy was a total stranger who I'd never met before, would never run into again. I still have not seen him again. I thought about looking him up. I probably should do that. And here he was, validating and saying to me, this is what you should be doing. I say it a lot, and I mean it. I try my best now to listen and to feel that soft tap on the shoulder that God gives me, because I don't want to be hit over the head with a frying pan again like I was that day. Because that's what it felt like, was just this big whack upside the head like, come on, Katie. I've been showing you this for a long time, and this is what you're going to do. So I started the process after that. I went and cried as I told the story again to the triumvirate at Mulberry. We had 3 retired ministers at the time, and they were very kind and listened to me very sweetly, and they have been supportive and loving and wonderful through this whole process. I talked to my district superintendent and then started the ball rolling. I also filled in at a wonderful little church down in Cochran First, and then Long Street, which is one of the oldest churches in Georgia, Methodist churches. It's actually where the phrase, "the Lord willing and the creek don't rise," was coined back in the early days, the early 1800s. They used to have to line their muskets up at the back of the sanctuary to make sure that the Indians didn't come try to overtake them during worship. So, if the Lord willing and the creek don't rise. And then I also was very, very honored and privileged to preach at First Christian Church. I grew up in the DOC denomination, and First Christian was started in part by my great-grandfather. And my dear friend, Will Johnson, allowed me to come take his pulpit one Sunday and preach there. So those are the places that I preached before I went to seminary and before I took this appointment where I am now. I applied to Candler. They're really two separate things you have to do to become an elder in the Methodist Church. The first is you've got to go through the Methodist Church process. The second is you have to get a degree. And so I have been through, and I'm a certified candidate for elder at this point for the United Methodist Church side, and had some wonderful mentors and friends through that process. What I was really more worried about, though, was going back to school after 25 years of being out of school. And that actually went a whole lot better than I ever thought it would. But when I applied to Candler, I applied in like November. I mean, they had to dig my school records out of basements because they were still on paper at schools that I took classes at for my undergrad. And they had to, my immunization records, I had to just get them all over again because those were long gone. And so I sent all the paperwork in, and they said around Valentine's Day, you will hear. I was visiting up at Lake Oconee. I took a little time to go up there just by myself, which I love to do. Go on a little getaways by myself to rejuvenate. And I did that. My friend was generous and let me use her house. I was sitting at the bar because I was eating alone at one of the restaurants up there in Reynolds Plantation, and the email came in. And I started weeping. And my waitress looked at me and said, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? Is there something I can help you with?" And I said, "No, I'm actually great. I just was accepted to grad school." And I have not looked back. And it's been a wonderful experience at Candler. I cannot say it enough how much I love it there. I quit my job at the end of April and started packing to move up here to North Georgia. The South Georgia Conference was very kind and let me move up closer to Candler and be borrowed by the North Georgia Conference during my time in school. And I'm very, very thankful for them for allowing me to do so. It has been a great journey. I have met wonderful new people. I have had great experiences. I have built community up here, and I love my time here in North Georgia so far. So I'm a year in. I start my second year at the end of this month. We're in August of 2023. And I'm just very excited. I want to end this episode with the verse that I chose as in my certified lay minister classes down in St. Simon's with Ann Bessard. The verse that I chose to be my verse, my mantra, my memorization verse, the thing that guides and leads me. And I'm going to read that to you now. I'm going to actually expand it a little bit. It's not just one verse. I'm going to read Hebrews chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. Hear now the words of the epistle. Therefore, let us move beyond the elementary teachings about Christ and be taken forward to maturity, not laying again the foundation of repentance from acts that lead to death and of faith in God, instruction about cleansing rites, the laying of hands, the resurrection of the dead, and the eternal judgment. And God permitting, we will do so. It's that last line that has started to ring true a lot more than any other. And God willing, we will do so. God willing, I am doing so. And I am so excited to continue this journey. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you have found some inspiration in my story, and maybe you can see God working in your own life and in your own story. Maybe you can look back on this whole long life that you have had and see those pivotal moments where you were building skills and gifts and graces that God can use in your everyday life as well. Well, there we go. Episode 1, Grits in the Gospel. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you back here for episode 2, Community Building. Have a great day.